phrase it correctly. So like on the last point in the conversation starter, you said like there's some skills outside of the career ladder that you can grow. I was wondering
Mhm.
like, what are some like soft skills that you think are critical for like, leveling up from mid to senior or to senior to staff outside of just coding in your
Uh,
perspective?
okay. So it's like a variant of this question, right? Where you're trying
Yeah,
to find
right.
to grow in the ladder, right? Rather than okay.
Right. Right. In the ladder and outside the ladder. I was kind of
Oh, like a
I
generalizable
was
skill
saying
that
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. I think it's a variant of the underrated skills because the underrated skills are what's
Okay.
going to give you the edge. Plus, like
Right.
part of the response to the last question was what are the foundational skills that will help you accelerate your learning on new skills that you pick up, right? So if you combine the two, like if you're really good at like learning quickly and you have an eye for like what's an underrated skill, then you combine the two and basically you'll grow, right? Because that's where the edge comes from. Like, it's not from like putting in more hours because I think like people were like to Michael's like first question, if you're like a really dialed in type A person, like everyone's putting in similar hours. It's just, are you thinking strategically about like where your time is going and are you acting with high intent? I'll give you a few tangible ones where one thing other than like the super meta skills is understanding how to work cross functionally. So I would just check like how tightly can you work with product and are you able to like let's say transfer over to product for a month and like do at least on par with like what the average expectation is. That's usually a good test because product is a very loaded word, especially in tech industry, that just means like generalized business pertaining to whatever application the product is, right? So that's a good, really good test for like how good your business sense is, and other things like softer skills like communication. Like, can you talk to users? Do you understand people's needs? Right? Are you good at like driving alignment, influence without authority? Um, so like seeing if you can work cross-functionally in products, one thing. The other thing is, can you productize your expertise? So that's a variant of content creation because I think a lot of engineers leave a lot on the table. They have a lot up here, but they don't productize their knowledge into content. Um, one thing is like when you're writing code, you're actually productizing your knowledge, but just like in one way, right? Because you're applying like how you interact with a computer or to get the computer to do stuff and get it to do something useful in the workflow to move the needle, right? So it's actually like taking a process and then productizing it into software. But you could do the same with your expertise. So one thing is like improving documentation, but it's like don't leave it just there on the Confluence page sitting, right? Say like, hey guys, like I did this like in the Slack channel, and say it's like it solves this problem. I thought I passed my insights along, and then you link them to the Confluence page. That's like a half step in the right direction, right? If you want to go further, then it's like if it's a big win, then celebrate the win and ask your manager if you can run like a lunch and learn and run a training or debrief a case study on what you did, right? Then you can ladder that up into, well, if that is a really big team win, then can we present at town hall? So you can increase the stakes gradually, but it all starts with just productizing what you already did. So you could scale your knowledge without you being there. That's incredibly powerful. Especially when you're moving like initially from IC to manager, because like it'll just feel overwhelming and you can't be everywhere at once. So you really got to learn to scale yourself. And the one of the best ways to scale yourself is through content. The other thing is learning to think abstractly. That's huge. Because the more you go up the ladder, especially at the manager of managers level, nothing's actually concrete. It's like it's not like what do I do for this or like how do I fix this bug or how do I improve the code here. It's it's something like how do we evaluate a third party vendor that comes in and pitches like a specific technology to add to the stack. So you're usually charged with what are the parameters to make that decision whether to bring that vendor in or not. but you're actually not like making the decision. You're just giving the guardrails for other people like in the weeds to go make that decision. And that's extremely uncomfortable, especially if you haven't fixed the issue when you're at the manager level. So when you get the manager or manager's level, it'll really, really show. So like being able to operate on different levels matters a lot. So like your thinking can be strategic, but next meeting you're like firefighting something tactical and you're able to like get into the code. And then the next meeting you go back up and have a strategic conversation. So that ability to switch gears is super important. Yeah, hopefully that's some enough ammunition to have like a solid backlog for your L&D to work on. Yeah, I'll plug it's like if you want to just learn it in a short period of time, similar to like me doing this group coaching AMA on the call right now. I unpack it all here in the bootcamp that's starting next week. So a lot of this is how do you find the opportunities worth pursuing in the first place? How does the engineering ladder actually work? So you understand the rules of the game. How do you make decisions when nothing's clear? So when you're operating at the higher levels, things are more abstract. So you won't have all the details or like anywhere close to the complete information to make the deal, but how do you still survive and make good enough decisions and move on? And when should you slow down and actually collect more data to make a decision, right? And the career longevity thing comes in staying competitive over a 4-year career. So that includes like all of the accelerated learning, how do you consume content in a smart way, a lot of other like frameworks that have helped me over the years. Okay. Good stuff. Do we have any more questions in the chat? I think we addressed all the hands. I'm open to taking like career questions as well. Like if you're curious about any aspect of my career, some challenging times, like what was good or bad about each of the roles. How do you get like a side gig, right? To start teaching. There's a lot of avenues we can go down. Uh, yeah, I think it's Carl.
Yes, sorry, I have a question. Not relating to career, but like I want to know how do I know like I'm ready to like go from technically ready going from IC role to manager role because I just feel like I was never ready. I feel like there's so much to learn. Like I just never feel confident in a way that for me to just switch or anything. And and what is the pivot moment that you think you're ready for that?
Mm. I would ask you define like what is a manager level problem that is not an IC level problem. Like what's a new type of problem that you have to solve when you become a manager? Like give me any example like that comes to mind.
Probably you have to resolving like how do you make the team more efficient or how do you
Yeah.
resolve but I assuming that's the case.
Yeah, that's like the outcome. But usually like there's like many ways to go make the team more efficient that actually feels like a concrete problem if it's well understood and well defined enough. So I'll give you an example. So like new managers, I always train them to focus on process first.
Mhm.
If you just zoom out 1 layer or 2 layers from the Jira task, you'll notice there's bottlenecks in the process. Um, a lot of it is bad management literature out there, I think, and a lot of bad training that they'll teach you 2 things. They'll
Mhm.
say you need to go learn how to delegate. And then you need to learn how to like, communicate better, which is like in nebulous terms, not like specific, right? Because if we unpack communication, communication when you're negotiating contract and communication when you're trying to teach my 10-year-old math is completely different, right? So that's a sign it's like not well defined enough. And delegation, I never start there. But if you look at like 85% of managers, I'll be honest, it's just they're an administrator that just like handing you tasks. It's like person A task this, person B task this, right? Or it's like, I don't want to do this, I'll give you the task to do. That is just like a hallmark of a terrible manager. It's like a taskmaster from hell, right? It's like, why are like that many managers bad? It's because they actually don't understand like what is a management level problem. So it's like, have you fixed a process before, for example, or have you like zoomed out and looked at the SDLC that you're in and made a fix that made more than 2 developers work easier, right? So it's like you touch once, but impact like many. So it's like, did you make a one-to-many change at a process level? That's like the first like concrete problem. Then you get up to like more advanced problems, like where are there redundancies? Or it's like, where are there like no redundancies and there needs to be, right? So you like solve for single points of failure. That's like another very concrete problem that you can solve. It's like, can you identify where there is a single point of failure? And have you added redundancy to improve the resilience of the overall workflow? Empowering people is another one. It's not really like, sometimes it's being their cheerleader, but that's like usually like misunderstood. A lot of it is like, well, do they have limiting beliefs on like what they can do? Can you show them an example of what quality work looks like? And then you pull the quality bar up for the entire team. Those are management level problems. And the more you can define what those problems are and you're aware of them and you have reps in terms of solving them at work, then you'll know naturally whether you're ready or not for a manager. Because I can tell you, like, every manager has these issues. And if you come to the table and it's like, hey, I zoomed out on the process and noticed there's like friction here, friction here, friction here. Here's like some options I had in mind of like what we can do to solve it. And I already got started on the solution. Here's like 50% of the solution. The manager will like absolutely love you and just throw more management problems at you. So then you get your reps in. So you'll know when you know. But a lot of it is like unfair in a way because the org is not designed to have someone show you what this is and then hand you the problem, but yet they need to see you solving a different breed of problems before they promote you because of the conservative promotion policy. They want to avoid the Peter principle where they like elevate you to a role until you become incompetent. So they need to see you perform at the next level before they give you the title and the comp recalibration. But if you don't know what the next level problem looks like, you don't hunt for them, so you'll never get them.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it all comes in like just demystifying how this game works. Like how we start is, I always say it's like before you sit down to play any game, there's like the Chinese saying in like gambling, you got to define the rules and like when you quit, right? So before you like sit down to play the game, it's like understanding the rules of the game is very important, or else it's just basically playing blind, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's very like misunderstood how the management game works. So it comes down to like a taskmaster delegation type of thing, which it really isn't. Good. I'll take more. I'm down to, yeah, just chat for like 30 more minutes. So yeah, just feel free to come limit test my knowledge, right? On any of these things. Yeah, so like I guess if we extend Carl's question, it's like, why are there a lot of bad managers? It's not necessarily like an individual like level like fault or something, or it's more like the career ladder is designed in a way that it almost feels you're obligated to take on a manager role without even knowing like roughly what it is yet to get the compensation and the growth. But there's no like support infrastructure usually made to do that, right? So when you first enter the role, then it's like, wow, my tasks and my expectations is 3 or 5x'd. So I'm just gonna like delegate to other people to do the work that I don't have time to do or that I don't want to do. And that becomes the default of how you operate. But it's just more of an education gap and an infrastructure gap that the career ladder is not exactly designed to help people navigate these tough spots. And then there is like also a vicious cycle in there where the more this kind of behavior happens that's suboptimal, then like the more it's like considered okay to be a manager and operate this way, right? Because people are like looking at managers and stuff as role models. And if it's just operating like a PM, and that's what's defined as management, that behavior will like take a ripple effect and trickle down. So it's actually very important to just fix it outright by understanding like, what are you expected to do? What are the constraints you have to operate within? And what are the conditions you need to succeed in your role before even entering and before even sitting down to play the game.
Casey, yes, I just want to chime in quickly. I have to drop, but I really, really appreciate you doing this. I feel like it's actually really rare for a lot of engineers to have access to someone at your level. So just the fact that you're here and present and you're able to just interact with the community, I think is really powerful for anyone who has that privilege. So I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Raul.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. I need to drop off too because it's dinner time in California.
Oh, yes. There's a 3-hour.
Yeah. Awesome answers, man. Very insightful.
Yeah, I'll drop. So for everyone who wants to stick around, you're definitely, we're not gonna kick you out. So Casey, for as long as you want to stay, please do stay. And then for the last time, I will drop the link to Casey's course. It starts next week. I'm really excited for that. I feel like Casey is one of the most recommended members in Taro in terms of the quality of his advice. So I will, just drop a link for that if you want to have deeper engagement with Casey. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Yeah, it's dinner time. For the Eastern time crowd, yeah, it's getting like pretty late, but I'm like a morning and late night person that I operate the best at both ends of the day. And my brain just kind of doesn't work in the afternoon. You're actually catching me at a high point right now. Yeah, so the course, yeah, we're doing like final round enrollment. So it's like last call. Check out the link Raul pinged in the chat. And it's pretty descriptive on like what it offers in there and what each of these sections contain. A lot of it is like, I'll just quickly cover like the thesis behind the course. So like how the ideas are always laid out is each section is grounded on a central thesis. So for example, with section 1, the thesis is there's only 4 career ladder levels within the entire career ladder that matters because the rules of the game changes. So how you have to operate fundamentally changes. So we talked a little bit about that between the first 2 transitions. So it's really like IC to manager, manager to manager of managers, and then manager of managers to executive, meaning you're the highest in your function. So all the like hard problems will roll up to you, and your peer is usually cross-functional, like being the CEO. Because the rules of the game changes, then it's like what got you here won't get you to the next level. So it's like, what are those adjustments and what behaviors and kind of competencies are rewarded at each of these levels? So that sets the basis for the course in section 1. Then with that in mind, the thesis becomes the higher level you go, the more ambiguous the problems are, but the more clarity you're asked to provide and on a longer term horizon. So it's more ambiguity, but you're expected to give more clarity on the longer term horizon. So then it's like, well, what skills do I need if I can only pick 2 skills? Then it comes down to, can I spot an opportunity that's worth pursuing? So it's like, how do you find leverage in the org? So you're not in IC mode all the time. You're zooming out like a layer or 2, like a process fix is leverage. Rationalizing a part of your tech stack is leverage. Changing an incentive, how people are like rewarded and punished, that's big leverage. So that's grounded in a lot of system thinking. And how do you zoom out and have a playbook to look for process changes? Look for like, how do you control like the quality of talent coming in? Like a fixed your interview loop is high leverage. So if I compare mentoring one person on the team and giving them feedback to produce better code to fixing my interview loop, that interview loop is like 200x the leverage of like mentoring one developer, right? So it's just like having a picture of like what's high leverage and low leverage and being able to consistently identify that is important. Then once it's identified, it's like, how do you make quality decisions under uncertainty? Because the ambiguity goes up and the time horizon goes up. So you have a toolkit to navigate the waters when you have incomplete information. So then things like statistical thinking come in. Things like mental models come in. Things like what decisions you use a heuristic. Just slap it on and move on. So you have the reserves for the 5% of decisions that's actually going to make or break you. How do you set parameters in so you know when to quit? Because a lot of stuff is, once I'm in, I have sunk cost fallacy and I have escalation of commitment. Plus, like, everyone will like hold you accountable to see it through. So a big thing that saved me a lot of times is we establish when it's quitting time before like we embark upon a big initiative. So that goes back and builds in the expectation that's like, I know when to quit. And everyone's aware and aligned on if the initiative goes sideways and we're sinking this much time and money and without this level of results, then we reevaluate, right? So that stuff's gotten me out of a jam many times. And the last one is all the meta learning, critical thinking, smart content consumption. All that's packed in there for not like, how do I get paid 20% more in 2 years? But it's like, how do I stay competitive in the game for 40 years? It's like, how do I learn quickly? How do I get more reps when the scope is not given to me at work? How do I grow outside of work? So that's the central thesis of the course. More than happy to like answer questions in this bucket as well. If there's a section that you're particularly interested in, let me know. Any tips for meta learning? Okay. We could talk about this for hours. Okay. So let me do the assets. So first is like skill selection. So it's like, how do you identify a skill like worth learning? And then it's like, how do I get more reps to learn that skill faster, right? So assuming like you pick the right skill to learn, then meta learning is just comes down to how many repetitions can I get through it? And each repetition, you make sure it's a complete feedback loop. So what that means is if I'm writing code and I don't like do a pull request and have it interact with the other code and have other people review my code, then that's not a full repetition, right? Same with content. Like if you write in isolation and you don't publish, then that's not a full feedback loop. So that's the premise. So you need to make sure like before you count a rep, it's a full feedback loop. Then the second thing is like, once you have one feedback loop, how do you like get more of those? Because you're not always handed like more repetitions at work, right? So what I do is I introduce constraints or like I change the parameters of the problem. So for example, if I solved X problem using like these 3 set of tools, what I like to do is like, I like to take away one of these tools and then think about it's like, oh, can I still solve the problem? Or can I solve a problem with a different set of 3 tools? Or I solved this problem with these 3 tools with a team of 3 in 6 weeks. And then I tighten the constraint. What would I do differently if I need to solve it in 2 weeks? Right? So you're actually like manipulating the problem and the case study in like a way that gives you more reps without you actually getting real problems handed to you. So that's actually how you like squeeze the most out of your learning. It's analogous to like how athletes make it a routine to review film, but like knowledge workers should do the same thing. There are things like you could review your journal, but then like go back 3 months and then see what you're writing about in your journal and how you thought, your thought process, and then see how your thought process evolved, right? What I do is I review my calls too. So for events like this, or if I show up on a podcast, I actually rewatch my own podcast at least twice. And I pause in opportunities where like, oh, I could address that question better, right? So by doing that, you're actually getting more than one rep, right? Because you get a rep by like putting yourself out there and sharing your knowledge. You get another rep by like fielding a question. You get another rep by maybe thinking about how do I answer another variant of this question, or you get another rep by like adding constraint, and then you get more reps by actually like rewatching what you did. So it's just like actually being conscious of just how do I get more iterations on the problem. The other thing I used to do is you can only work on like 1 or 2 projects at a time at work, right? So on the weekend or evenings, I would go into other teams' GitHub repositories and just do GitHub surfing. So just look at like what the gist of the project is. And then even if I get only 20% of the learning versus someone who's actually on the project, that's still 20% extra, right? So if I'm able to take like 20% of the learning across 10 additional projects outside of the one that I'm learning, that I'm doing, then that's like 200% more, right? So a lot of it is like mistaking that you have to do everything to learn more, where you don't have to do everything. Like if you're only relying on you have to do it to learn as your only avenue of learning, you're severely capped. It's the same with making mistakes. I think like making mistakes yourself to learn from them is highly, highly overrated. Charlie Munger has this great saying. It's like, well, a certain way to fail is actually like making all the mistakes yourself. A lot of it is like looking at other people's mistakes and learning from them, including your own, right? So it's all additive. The more like you actually consciously pay attention and just try and get more reps out of this, the better you are gonna get. The other thing with meta learning quickly is jump into a domain that you have no idea how it works, and then build your 0 to 60 muscle. That's the most reliable way, because that's just training you how to learn a skill from 0. And then once you're done with that, pick a new skill, go 0 to 60, 0 to 60 again. And then your career will look somewhat like this. Okay, switching the EM role. That was a good point to me out. What's the best strategy to apply for the roles? I think it's just like knowing what the problems are that an EM solves, and then having your actions just show that you're solving these problems day in, day out. Starting with your own workplace, but if you get into the content game, for example, what you should be writing about is like how you approach these types of problems that an EM would solve. So instead of like writing about the latest pull request you landed in production, you're writing about, well, I noticed these 3 things in the overall SDLC, and here's like the fix to make it better, right? Then other people will naturally see you as an EM before you have the title. So it's only a matter of time before the title equalizes with your behavior. Yeah, so it's actually like we're trying to apply for it is probably I get where it's coming from, but I want to switch the mentality to like you're just solving EM problems day in, day out, and people will just find you basically. Because in this career, like I didn't really aim to like say, I want to go build a team. It's when I didn't have a team at Accenture or when I was leading things at the project level, a lot of it showed that I cared about talent development and I cared about growing other people's career. So naturally, like when the opportunity comes up, people will like say, okay, he's already solving problems at that level. So it's not a stretch just to give them the title so they can keep solving those problems. Yeah, yeah. And I always err on the side of just apply, because you don't want to solve problems that you don't know you necessarily have. Because it's only when the market gives you feedback, then you know you have a gap, right? We're usually our own worst critic, that we always think we have gaps, and then you just spend infinite amount of time solving for gaps that you may or may not have to land a role. Okay, I think it was Aaron and then Lucia. So I'll take.
Oh, I think
questions.
Carly was actually ahead of me. His head, or
Oh, I think that's
sorry.
an old hand.
Oh, my bad. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just to add on to Karthi's question about switching to an EM role. So I've had like a hybrid of like TPM, CTO roles. I guess like I'm really, really strong, obviously, on the product side. I'm just more concerned like what on the technical side. I know I'm like a published author, I'm like subject matter expert in my like subsector or field. But is there anything else I should be looking at? I just feel like that's sort of like what you're talking about, like the gap. I'm just like, oh, do I actually have to like, I don't know, whiteboard again for AI roles of X, right? I have a lot of friends who were applying for TPM roles for like major YC backed AI companies, and they told me 90% even for like I don't know, IC or EM roles or TPM roles, they just were like, I'm so out of it because they hadn't whiteboarded in forever. Like, how much time should I be spending on sharpening technical skills where I'm thinking about customer success of, oh, well, this is the amount spent on compute for tokens on open source LLMs versus proprietary, stuff. So, I mean, I'm thinking at that level, and I'm just wondering, like, what's the best way to tackle that? Because I know it's a
Yeah.
gap I've identified. I'm just having the worst time being like, I gotta remember how to do, I don't know, like binary search trees or some like fundamental crap from like 10 years ago or from undergrad that it's just painful
Yeah.
to get to that
Yeah,
level.
like
People
I
are just
haven't
like, do the
touched
code,
code
and I'm
for
like, I
a
don't
long
know.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not like good at the keyboard anymore. I haven't touched code for a long time, especially now in content creation. So like it depends on like your approach to job search, where if you're trying to meet the demand where they are, usually through like a non-relationship based job search where you're applying, then yeah, you have to go through the ringer. And if you do find the whiteboarding is a gap and you care about like just landing the role, then it just comes down to buckling down and solving for that. But there is an alternative route, which is through relationships. So people will hire you for the things you're actually good at rather than like something you're trying to like pick up and shoehorn into hacking an interview process. Right. So none of these roles actually I went through like a standard interview process, but it takes longer and it's heavily relationship based, that there has to be a lot of trust for these roles to come up. So, but then these are the best roles once you land them because they design the role around your strengths rather than trying to shoehorn your skills into an interview process or a role that may or may not even fit. Right. But there's a trade-off clearly, right? Because if you go through like the application route, then you'll see more roles because more roles are posted. But if you go the other relationship route, there are fewer roles, but if you do land a role that way, you can bypass that process and they'll hire you for like who you are. That makes sense. And I think it's worth mentioning that director plus roles are never posted. So it's only a matter of time before you have to build this muscle if you have director plus aspirations. They're all hidden market roles. None of them are posted. They're all through relationships, investor networks, VCs. So sooner or later, yeah, like if you're shooting for the moon for like manager and like really top tier comp, a lot of these roles are actually customized and designed to the person. So in the engineering ladder, when you get up to the director plus level, it's more and more bespoke and less and less commoditized. So that standard interview gauntlet is to typically hire for commoditized roles, not for bespoke roles. But at the CTO role, everything is a one-on-one role. It's a bespoke role. So that's something to think about, that it may feel like it's a waste of time to do that, but like it's a lifelong skill. If you have aspirations to like hit those levels and play the hidden job market, which you eventually will need to. They actually value a concept I take from sports and basketball called value versus replacement player. So that concept matters more and more. So if you're at CTO level, there can only be one CTO, right? So your fit in terms of like what they need at their stage of the company, what CTO needs to do, needs to be extremely high, because you can't have two CTOs and have like the two people have additive value. It's more like you're occupying the CTO seat. So what's your value over a replacement player, right? So it's like basketball. You have like, you're occupying like one spot on the court. It's not like how good of a basketball player you are. It's how good relative you are to the person they can bring in on the bench to fill your spot. So the game becomes more and more like that as you progress. And it's less and less commoditized, where it's like I can go from 8 engineers to 9 and I just add capacity to my engineering org. It works less and less like that.
Thanks. That was so helpful.
Yeah, no problem. I think there was another hand, but I don't see it now. Okay, so Lenny has a question. Can you expand on joining roles by relationships? even before a role gets open. Yeah, I think conservatively speaking, there's like probably half the positions go through at least an internal search first before it's even posted. Or a lot of the job postings, they're not actually open roles. They already have some person in mind, either internally or through like relationships and referrals that they want to place in the role. So yeah, like a lot of people get discouraged by like I'm cold applying to like 1,000 jobs, not hearing back. You got to factor into that a lot of these jobs are ghost postings, are not actually real. Because I've been on the hiring manager side where, even though I had a candidate locked up, like 3 months before I knew the requisition is going to open the headcount, I already like lined somebody up for it. It's still like they force you to go through like the HR policy to still post the role. Even though I push back hard against that, it's like, well, I already like lined someone up for the role. You're just kind of sending someone on a wild goose chase. But you know, it's bureaucratic, so they make you go down that route. So a lot of these roles aren't even real. So you should factor that into your expectations. Yeah, so even before a position gets open, it's new for me. Yeah, the hidden job market's not talked about a lot because it is hidden job market. There's a lot of things just past the manager levels that's just not discussed. A lot of like mastermind CTO groups exist out there for the reason that like if you're a CTO, you're dealing with CTO level problems and you have no peer to actually bounce ideas off of, or if you're stuck and it's engineering related, then it's tough luck. Because your boss is the CEO and your peers are the board of directors, right? So you're not going to be able to bring any engineering problems to them, which was why like CTOs and like high up VPs and stuff naturally form in these circles. And they're masterminds that like help each other solve problems. And of course, like they'll like refer people within their network for when like a new opening opens up, because they're usually ahead of when the demand drops. So they're always ahead of the curve. If you're relying on LinkedIn or Indeed for these things, you're already like 6 to 8 weeks behind when the headcount planning happened minimum. That's why it's still relationships. Like if you have an in on the company, then you know when the headcount refresh is happening and how many spots there actually are and who's making the hiring decision. So if you're doing outreach, it's like you're not going to reach out to HR. You can go directly to the hiring manager, right? So everything's still relationship-based, social network-based. Yeah, you don't want to be a commodity engineer. Yeah, true. I think commodity anything. I think before we started the call, we were talking about how AI is just pushing up the minimum bar for what's considered like valued work, because AI does a couple things. It's makes it easier for you to learn a new topic. So your like 0 to 20 is accelerated, but that means like anything below like the 20, it's in like AI automation territory, right? So what that means is like the line for like how good you need to be on like each of your domains is rising. So then it becomes more of like a winner take all type of market, which is like important to stay above the line. So you need skills like to round out your skill sets, future-proof, accelerated learning, because the only constant is that it change and the line gets like higher and higher, right? So if you're commoditized, then yeah, like it's a problem where it's like you're fighting a race to the bottom mechanic, which is always a losing proposition. Because it's not just AI, there's like offshoring too. Just to be part of like 2 of the biggest offshoring firms on the planet. So yeah, there's always like downward price pressure on any commodity, services included, right? So just fact of reality. It's not like right or wrong. It's just how market dynamics are. Yeah, we should stop expecting to learn everything from our job. Yeah, because that's severely constraining you. Carl, you have another question? Yeah.
Yes, I do. So one thing that you mentioned earlier was like, or both Rahul and Alex mentioned is share content on like social media and to help you to grow, right? But
Mhm.
like one thing that I always find is like, what if like what I know is very like naive, or I always thinking like everyone should already know what I already know. So like there's nothing to share. That's kind of all like always the concept I kind of have. Um, it probably is not true in probably in your perspective. And I'm wondering how would you think for me to like overcome this kind of issue? Or maybe
Yeah, it's objectively just not true, I think. Because there's a point where you didn't know what you know now, right? So
yes, you're
like 2
right.
years
But
ago, you was reading like whatever we wrote today. They're like, I learned some stuff and I sped up my learning curve. People like the natural human reaction won't be like, why are you posting this? They're like, if it's not for them and they already know it, they just move on. Right? If it's
yeah.
like they don't know it, then they pause. It's like, oh, thanks, Carl. Right? This is a good tip. Yeah, so that's just like overcoming things because like it's objectively not true if you think about it, right? Like 2 years ago, you didn't know what you know now.
But there will be a lot of people posting like what I know, right? I assuming there will be a repetitive content in there. I'm not the only one knowing it, right? Like, what's the
Yeah,
value
nothing is
reading?
original. Nothing is actually original. Everything's a rehash on like very few people like come out of the blue and invent an idea, right? A lot of like my stuff, like let's say in the course, it's not I didn't invent like 90% of this, right? It's more like I have internalized certain ideas to an extent that I know I have like my independent take on it. That's very important, right? You're not like rehashing how like TDD works, right? It's more like you're taking an aspect within TDD and you're saying it's like, okay, this is like how I approached it, or you're coming with like an example of how you applied TDD to your own work, right? Or you're highlighting an aspect of TDD that's like a myth, right? Or it's like misunderstood. Trust me, the signal to noise ratio out there is really, really bad. I look at it as like, as long as you're improving the signal to noise ratio overall, you're doing like the world a service.
I
If you
see.
scroll LinkedIn feed, it's not pretty. It is not pretty what 90% of the feed looks like. You're doing your small part to improve signal to noise. And so what if they heard it before? I just look at it like, well, everyone can like relearn and review ideas. You need a refresher, and sometimes it helps to hear it from different people too. So it's like, yes, it's been said before, so has 99.9% of things, but today you get to hear my take on it.
Thank you. Super helpful.
Yeah. If you ever post or if you're struggling, hesitating to hit the publish button, just DM me.
Definitely do.
All right. Yeah, we're gonna wrap up soon, but if you like the topics covered today, you want to continue the conversation. My three main channels are my Substack newsletter, which I actually cover like a lot of in-depth insight pieces that I relaunched this year. There's already 3 issues out just in 2024. So let's check that out. That's actually the best way to follow what I'm doing in my life within expanded skills and other things I'm up to. So it's written as like a modern day reporter, just like reporting on my journey and sharing the stuff along the way, right? So give that a read. I'm active pretty much daily on LinkedIn and Twitter. So yeah, like follow me there. Yeah, and drop a comment, right? Say hello, DM me, so we can like continue this conversation. And of course, you can find me on Taro. Usually pretty active on the Taro Premium Slack channel and the Q&A board as well.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Casey. I know you keep mentioning Will Larson's blog. Any other books or like blogs that you find have been really helpful in building your thought process and perspective?
Yeah, most of it is actually like outside of tech is where I take these things from. So go to my newsletters about page, and my 4 role models, none of them are actually from tech. So it's Aristotle, Da Vinci, Richard Feynman, and Charlie Munger. So that's where I actually got most of my inspiration from. But in tech, like I think Will Larson's the de facto standard. Kellen Elliott McRae is also like an absolute beast. If you go to YouTube, find his talk on the art of managing up. One of the best 35-minute talks, like hands down. He has a blog, but I don't think he updates it too much. Yeah, I think he's just focused on like being a CTO at this point. The other thing is like a lot of the high level operators don't post. They're actually like not public figures. So that's kind of difficult, right? Because then just because you're a content creator doesn't mean you're good. And just because you don't post content doesn't mean like you're not good. But for tech, those are my two recommendations. Charity Majors. I like her take on things too. Tanya Riley's article on Blue Work. Those are all like things in the tech library, but for outside of tech, just go to my about page on Substack and you'll see like where I draw my inspiration from. So like modern day is like Naval Ravikant, Tim Ferriss. If you're into like the self-help AI like productivity category, you'll run into the same names over and over again. Naval Ravikant's like Almanac is legendary book, like top 3 of all time, like easily. Tim Ferriss's podcast, I have probably over 500 episodes or 500 hours listened to at this point, which is beyond like what a normal person consumes. So if these things vibe with you, I'm pretty sure you'll like the newsletter. Yeah. Okay, I'll take like just 2 more based on hands here, and then we'll wrap up. So Shubhashri, do you want to ask your question, and then Carl will come back to you?
Hey, Casey, thank you so much. It was such a great session, and I was just curious on the topic of publishing, content every day. I'm curious to know if you have any systems that you stick to for, like coming up with new ideas to publish or talk about, and yeah, like if you're open to sharing that.
Yeah. Go to the first article I wrote on my Substack. It's a 6,000 word plus guide on my content creation process. That I wrote last year in June.
Thank you. I'll take
that
it
covers like all the ins and outs of content creation when I was first getting into it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey.
Yeah, no problem. Carl, I assume you're good, right? You have your hand down. Okay,
Yeah,
so
sorry, that was like the old hand.
Yeah, it's an old hand. All right, we'll wrap up. So yeah, like follow me on these channels if you're interested to go deeper with me and want me to like coach you in a tight group setting. Consider joining the bootcamp. Plus, like if you want one-to-one like attention as well, then it's like just DM me, mention this talk, and if you want one-to-one coaching, we'll jump on a call and hash out like what help you need.